Welcome. So in this part of the lesson, we're going to go really through the main event. So this is the main event here, and it says in the following example, the factor theorem is used to find a linear factor. So we need to solve this using our factor theorem. Now, before we kind of dive into this, I want to talk about how you would know that you'd have to use your factor theorem to answer this, because in a test or in an exam, this nice little sentence here that tells you how to do it isn't going to be there. You're going to have to be able to look at this and say, hey, I need to use my factor theorem to solve this. So how would you know to do that? Well, remember, when you're solving something, the aim of the game is to factorize it. And then once you're factorized, you can then use your null factor theorem. Now, in our previous examples here, we were first given one that was already factorized for us. That was very nice. And then we were given things like this. And it was quite clear that I could take out a common factor of x. And then once I did that, I got a quadratic, and I could just factorize the quadratic. And so too over here. And then we saw another example in which we just had to use factorize by grouping to do it. And that was nice as well. Well, as we come to these examples here, what you need to be able to recognize is, well, firstly, I can't take out a common factor here. And secondly, I can't use factorize by grouping. That wouldn't be useful here. So because neither of those are possibilities, in order to factorize this, I'm going to have to use my factor theorem, which is a bit of a pain. Okay, but let's now dive into it. I'll go through each step, and hopefully by the end of it, you feel a bit more comfortable with it. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to say, let p of x be equal to what we're given right here, because I'm just going to be using that language, minus 4x squared minus 11x plus 30. Okay, so we're going to use our factor theorem, Now, our factor theorem says that, when we chuck in a number, if we get 0 out, that's how we know that we have found a factor. Now, we don't have to just chuck in any number willy-nilly. Rather, what we're going to do, so this is step 1, we're going to consider the factors of 30. Factors of 30. So that's how we know. We take our constant, and we're going to consider those factors and sub those factors into p of x, and see which one gives us 0 out. So let's consider what our factors of 30 are going to be. It's going to be plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 5, plus or minus 10, plus or minus 15, plus or minus 30. So this is where you begin to freak out a little bit and say, my goodness, am I going to have to sub in all of these until I get 0 out? And the answer to that is no. Remember, always start with the little numbers, and most of the time the questions are nice to you. So let's just start here. So I'm going to begin by subbing in p of 1. So if I sub p of 1 into this right here, I'm going to do this quickly. I'm going to get 1, because x cubed is 1, minus 4, minus 11, plus 30. Now, don't be silly. Obviously, this is not going to give me 0 out, is it? Because I've got, plus 30, minus 11, minus 4, plus 1. I mean, quite clearly, it's not going to be 0. So let's just ignore that one. Let's go to the next one, negative 1. So let's chuck negative 1 into this. Well, if I cube negative 1, I get negative 1 out. Negative 1 squared is 1, then negative 4 there. This is going to become plus 11, and this is still plus 30. Again, quite clearly, 11 plus 30 is 41. Then I've got minus 1, minus 4. Quite clearly, it's not going to be 0. Let's move on to our next one, which is going to be positive 2. So I put positive 2 into this, and I'm going to get 8 out here because 2 cubed is 8. Then I'm going to get 2 squared, which is 4, and then minus 4, minus 16. Then I'm going to get minus 44. Sorry, minus 22, because 11 times 2 is 22. Then I'm going to get plus 30. Okay, this one looks somewhat promising, so let's just keep analyzing it. 8 minus 16 is going to be negative 8. Negative 22 plus 30 is going to be plus 8. Would you look at that? Hooray. That gives me 0 out. So when I put 2 in, I got 0 out. So what does that mean our factor is? Therefore, x minus 2 is a factor. So it's important that you recognize that we put 2 in, that means x minus 2 is a factor. Okay, perfect. So we found a factor. Hooray. What's the next thing that we're going to do here? Well, the next thing that we're going to do, having found a factor, is now divide it. So step 2 is divide. because that's how we can find more factors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go x minus 2, and I'm going to divide that by this. And remember, because this is a factor, when I divide it by this, I shouldn't get a remainder out, but rather just another factor. So let's come in here and let's do some division. So let me just write this out nicely. This is going to be x cubed minus 4x squared minus 11x plus 30. All right. X times what is x cubed? X squared. X squared times x is x cubed. X squared times negative 2 is negative 2x squared. Bracket minus, this always goes away, negative 4x squared plus 2x squared, because a negative and a negative is a plus. So it's going to give me negative 2x squared here. The next, I carry down this negative 11x. And I go again, x times what is negative 2x squared? It's going to be negative 2x. Then I go negative 2x times x is negative 2x squared. Negative 2x times negative 2 is plus 4x, because a negative and negative is a positive. Then I put brackets, then I minus, then I do this. This always goes to 0. Now this is now negative 4x, because I got a negative here. So it's negative 11x minus 4x is negative 15x. Carry this down, plus 30. X times what is negative 15? X is going to be negative 15. Negative 15 times x is negative 15x. Negative 15 times negative 2 is going to be plus 30. Bracket minus that. This is going to become negative 30. 30 minus 30 is 0. That's how we know we've done it correctly. This tells me right here. Now, let me put this in another color because this is important. We should have expected to get no remainder. If you got a remainder, you did something wrong, because we found out that x minus 2 was a factor, and a factor goes perfectly into something. So we shouldn't have gotten a remainder out, and we didn't. So we did it correctly. Now, what we can do is say this times this is equal to that. We know that that is true. And this right here is really important. So now I'm going to rewrite what I've been told. I know that x minus 2 times this, x squared minus 2x minus 15, is equal to this right here. So it's equal to p of x. So hopefully what you can see here is that we have a nice linear factor and a quadratic, and that's still equal to p of x. So now all we need to do is factorize the quadratic. So that is step 3. So let's zoom in. Actually, let's make sure that all this is lined up. So step 3 will be here. And we're going to factorize the quadratic. So I'm factorizing this thing right here. So let me just rewrite it, just for the fun of it. It's going to be x minus 2, x squared minus 2x minus 15, like that. Now I'm going to factorize this. So that's what I'm doing. I'm factorizing this right here. To do that, let's do this and that. I'm going to go, I need a product of negative 15. I need a sum of negative 2. And those two numbers are going to be negative 5 and positive 3, because negative 5 times 3 is negative 15, negative 5 plus 3 is negative 2. So that means what I can do is I can rewrite this now as x minus 2, then I'm going to get x minus 5, x plus 3. Now remember what I said at the very beginning of this question. In order to solve something, you need to factorize it. So we needed to factorize this, and hey presto, we have factorized it. So this is really what we needed to do all along. So now what our final thing is going to be, step 4, is use our null factor theorem to get our final answer. Theorem. So remember what we're going to do here is we're going to say let each of these be equal to 0. So I'm going to go x minus 2 is equal to 0, or x minus 5 is equal to 0, or x plus 3 is equal to 0. And what we're going to end up with is our solutions are going to be 2, 5, and -3. 2, 5, or -3. Like that. Perfect. And that's how you do these questions. So as you can see, it took quite a long time. We first had to use our factor theorem to find a factor. We then had to divide. We then had to factorize the quadratic. Then we had to use our null factor theorem. Now, if you had your calculator, you would of course be crazy to do all of this by hand. And down here, I've given you some instructions on how you could use your TI Nspire to easily do this. And let's just go through how to do that in person now. So let's just come here. Let's just open up a calculator page here. And what you would do is go menu, you go algebra, you would go solve, and you would type in what you've been given here. So we're solving x cubed minus 4x squared minus 11x plus 30 is equal to 0, comma x. And as you can see, we got -3 as we did there. We got 5 as we did there. We got 2 as we did there. That's how you do it on your CAS. We can also, let me graph this. So Control C, Control that, add graph, Control V, and let's now graph this, enter. We get this. Menu, let's just zoom out a bit here. So as you can see, that's our quadratic. It's not done. Let's just menu analyze box. Like that. It's a bit nicer. And I can assure you that if we were to find our x-intercepts here, analyze graph, let's just find one of them. Look, we got 2 and we found 2 there. So that means the one to the right of this one should be 5. And would you look at that? We got 5. And that means this one over here should be -3. And if we were to check that out, we would get -3. Hooray. So we did it. So that's using the CAS. That's how to do it by hand. Hopefully all this made sense. I think I'll stop here. And in the final part of this video, I'll show you how to answer this one. Hopefully you found this useful, and I'll see you soon.